Hey guys, we're going to take a look at this chart right here in your Tuesday assignment. And in order to help us understand this bar graph, we're going to use a strategy called talk, okay? Which is just something that we use when we analyze different stimuli. In this case, we're doing a bar graph, right? So the first thing we do is look at the title. So I'm going to blow this chart up a little bit more for you guys. So the title is African Americans in Congress. Congress being the legislative branch, right, that makes the laws in our government. So the next part of the strategy is to look at all labels and to circle keywords. So looking at our labels, we could look at the x-axis to the side first, and these are the different years. And then we can also write something that we know about these years. So if I start all the way on the left-hand side, we see that that time period, those first couple years, would be the actual years of Reconstruction. Okay, so I'm going to, just like I would on paper, I'm going to circle those years. And I know that that's the time period of Reconstruction after the Civil War. Okay, now we also need to look at the y-axis, which says the number of representatives. So this would be how many African Americans are in Congress those years. Okay, now going back to our strategy, I'm going to skip L for now because that's really the last step, but we're going to go to the key. That's important to know what the symbols and colors represent. So I see the colors here, the red meaning House of Representatives, the yellow being Senate. Okay, so looking at those bars, it's kind of hard to see the yellow, but the red really stands out. And those are the two houses that make up our legislative branch or Congress. All right, so now we're going to the most important part, L, look for trends. Increases, decreases, what kind of patterns there are, and maybe why that might be. So I noticed during Reconstruction, there's an increase, right, in how many African Americans are being elected. But then a few years later, about 10 years later, it's kind of dropping off, right? And there's no African Americans serving in Congress for a while. Okay, they're not being elected. And then around like 1965, 1960s, there's an increase, and it continues to increase until the present day as well. Okay, it cuts off at 2009, but we get the idea. So be thinking about why. First of all, why were there more African Americans being elected into Congress after the Civil War? What caused that to decrease? And then what's happening in the 1960s to make that happen? Well, Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement happens in the 1960s. That could have led to that increase. And then this week you're learning about the reaction of the white South to African Americans serving in Congress. So we know the KKK is formed to kind of push against this election of African Americans. So knowing all of this, you can go back to your assignment for Tuesday and you can take a look at this question. Okay, these documents show that Reconstruction was successful or unsuccessful. And what we mean by that was Reconstruction successful in getting African Americans' rights? And you might say yes and no. Just type your answer here explaining yourself.